Yes. Okay. Hello there. How do you say your name? Yorga. Yorga, is it?
It's Jorge in Spanish.
Jorge. Jorge.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, yeah. Nice to meet you, Jorge.
Nice to meet you too. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well indeed. Yeah.
Great. So we are here to talk about your new album, the Harmony Codex. So let's do it. First of all, it's always special to have new music to share with the world. So how do you feel this time with the new album?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It's actually been a long time. I mean, my last album was more than three years ago, and this record was made predominantly during lockdown. So it was made in a very kind of isolated situation where I wasn't really able to work with or interact with other musicians. So a lot of it happened very much in private, and so it's extraordinary now to be releasing it into the world and allowing everyone to experience it too. So very exciting for me, very exciting indeed. Yeah,
right. Please tell us about the main concept behind the Harmony Codex.
so the Harmony Codex was a short story which I included in a book I published last year, which was mainly a book about music, and it kind of had elements of autobiography, but the book ends with this short story which I describe it as a sort of dystopian sci-fi story. So sci-fi but dystopian because it's very much set on a world that we would recognize as our own, as a universe we would recognize. And the story is about these two kids, this brother and sister. So I'm just going to close this. A brother and sister that enter a building, and there's a terrorist attack in the building, and they find themselves trapped in the building, and they're trying to escape the building, and they find themselves on a staircase which becomes a never-ending staircase. The staircase keeps on going up and up and up and never ends. So it has this very kind of surreal, dreamlike quality to it. It's to the point that you're not sure whether what you're reading is a dream or is real, and even to the point that the characters themselves aren't sure if what they're reading, of what they're doing, if what they're a part of is a dream or is reality. And so it's a very fantastical piece of writing, and I based a lot of the ideas on the story, on the album. I based a lot of the ideas on the album on this story, some more directly than others, but it all has a kind of strand that runs through it, which relates back to this idea of the never-ending staircase. Even to the point of the album cover references that.
Cool. So a sci-fi story that talks about dreams and things like that, and it came after the Future bites that talking about very real things. So it's an interesting change. You think?
Well, I always like to do something different with each album, and I think that's something that my fans have got a bit used to now, that every album that I release is something completely different to the previous record. And part of the appeal, I think, of being someone who listens to my music is not knowing exactly what's going to come next. And I like that in artists that I follow. Some of the artists I've admired the most over the years were the ones that were always surprising the listeners, whether it was Kate Bush or David Bowie or Frank Zappa or whoever it was. You're never quite sure what kind of thing they were going to do next. And I like that idea of almost existing outside of any notion of being a part of a musical genre, just being able to create your own musical world, your own musical vocabulary, and such to the point that your fans almost expect you to do different things every time. And I like to think that maybe I have got to that point with my fans now, that they would be disappointed if I didn't do something different each time.
Yeah, right. And this comes after the great experience of the Porcupine Tree reunion last year. How was for you all the things that happened with the Porcupine Tree reunion?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, that album that we released, it was mostly written 12 years ago. So we didn't really write it. Well, we wrote a couple of new pieces, but the touring was a lot of fun. It was great to go out and play with these amazing musicians again, and to connect with the fans again, and to pick up my guitar again and be a bit of a guitar player again, you know, because I don't really play a lot of guitar on the new records I make these days. I prefer to work with other guitar players. In Porcupine Tree, I am the guitar player. So that was fun to be a guitar player again. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, you got a dog on the back. What's his name?
This is Bowie.
Bowie.
Yeah. Sweet, isn't he? Yeah, he always sits next to me when I'm doing interviews. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, we were talking about the Porcupine Tree reunion. Maybe it helped you to take some fresh air, you know, a pause in your solo career, something like that.
Yeah, maybe so. I think so. I mean, I was working on the Harmony Codex during the time that Porcupine Tree were recording and touring, but I think it was liberating in a way, because it made me feel like, because I'm very aware that in my fan base, the people that listen to my music, there are these little kind of tribes, little groups of people. There's the people who like the really old-fashioned progressive rock. There's the people who like the more sensitive electronic pop. There's the people who like the more metal aspects of some of my stuff. And I think Porcupine Tree kind of gave those people a little bit more of what they liked, you know, the heavier guitars and all that stuff. So it was nice in that sense to be able to feel like, well, I've done that with the Porcupine Tree record, so I can go in a more kind of experimental, maybe more electronic sound design, more cinematic direction with the solo record. Yeah. And talking about all those different kinds of music that you use as an inspiration, all of that is put in the Harmony Codex, right? We can hear all the kind of influences. So how do you work with that to put on the same work all these different music? Well, the simple answer to the question is I just don't think about it. So I say that because in the past, I have usually, when I've started a record, I've usually had some kind of idea about what kind of record I wanted to make. So for example, with the Future Bites, I knew that I wanted to make a much more direct electronic pop record. If you go back to an album like The Raven That Refused to Sing, I wanted to make a more old-fashioned progressive rock sort of album. With an album like Insurgentes, I wanted to make an album that was more influenced by post-punk and alternative music. So I've always tended to have with my albums this agenda at the beginning of a process, and I really didn't this time. I just allowed all of the different sides of my musical character to just come out naturally without thinking too much about it. So yeah, a 10-minute ambient piece, great. An acoustic guitar, a nostalgic acoustic guitar song, great. A piece of jazz progressive rock, great. A more electronic piece, great. Let's put them all together. Let's not try and think about this too much. The point is this, I suppose, that every one of those pieces of music, no matter how different they might be in style, they all sound like me. And so I guess I had more confidence in my own musical personality this time, to be able to put all of these apparently different kinds of music on the same record.
Mm-hmm. Good. Something that we always wanted to know, the live shows. Are you preparing a tour to promote the album? I guess so. Maybe it's a big challenge to take this music to the stage, you know, and preparing a new show. How are you working on that sense?
Yes, it is, but I like a challenge. I like a challenge. You know, I mean, in some senses, a lot of the records I've made over the years have been challenging to recreate live. But you're right, this one particularly, because it's so diverse, and almost every track sounds like a different band in a way. It's going to be difficult. And one of the things I really want to do is to try and bring the spatial audio aspect into a live context. So one of the mixes of the record is a Dolby Atmos mix, which means that you're literally hearing the music all around you, from behind you, from above you. And I've been doing a lot of listening events over the last 2 months or so, bringing fans, bringing media along to listen to the record in Dolby Atmos. So I would love to be able to take that into a live space and actually have speakers above the listener, behind the listener. So it's very early days yet. I'm not rushing into touring this. If it happens, it will be maybe next spring. But I want to do something that will again really raise the bar in terms of what's possible with presenting essentially a live rock show in a live concert hall. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it's very cool to see how the industry of live music is looking into the future too. Finding new techniques and all of that.
I think it has to. But what's been disappointing to me is how little of that's happening in the world of rock music. It's almost all happening in the world of electronic music and urban music. So the rock musicians seem to have got stuck in this sort of thing where you go on stage, the audience are out there, you're there, and you just perform. And it's this very two-dimensional thing. Although there are some artists, of course, that are doing things in the round now, which is really exciting. I think Metallica's new tour is in the round. So there are people experimenting with it, but not as much as I would like. I think there's a lot of possibilities now with new technology to do some really exciting things with how you redefine what a live concert experience can be. So I'm excited about trying to be a part of that world, I suppose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and talking about technology and the future, what's your point of view about the artificial intelligence that is becoming very important in music, in all aspects in life right now?
It's very worrying. I mean, part of me thinks that music has sounded like artificial intelligence for a long time anyway. Every time I hear like modern pop music, for example, it's so processed, it's so computerized that it sounds already to me like it was made by artificial intelligence. So I think it's been with us for a while anyway. But I think we're already at a stage where, a lot of, say, very generic music, and when I say generic, I mean music that has very strict rules, very strict parameters. So you might say like techno music, club music, that kind of music already could be very easily generated automatically by artificial intelligence, by computers. I think for me, the beauty of music, the music I love the most, has always been in the unpredictable things, the unpredictable elements, almost like the imperfections. And it would be very hard, I would imagine, for artificial intelligence to be able to recreate those kind of things. At least it is at the moment. But I think it's very worrying. I think it is a trend. If you go, but we talked about my science fiction story. I mean, I grew up reading a lot of science fiction stories from the mid 20th century, and a lot of those stories were about predicting a future where human beings would invent robots and in artificial intelligence that would render themselves obsolete. I mean, that Terminator thing, Skynet. What's the first thing Skynet does is destroy the people that created it, the species that created it. It's no longer necessary. And I think that is increasingly becoming more and more realistic. And the only mistake those science fiction writers made, was that they imagined these would be robots walking around. And they're not. They're inside these computers and processors. But the same is largely true. It's very, very worrying. And I worry about my kids. I'm not a part of the generation that will be really affected by it, but they will be. They will be.
Yeah, we will see what happens. What happens next. Well, Steven, that's all for me right now. Thank you very much for your time. And we hope to see you here in South America on the next tour.
I would love to come back. I hope so too. Fingers crossed. Nice to meet you, man. Have a great day. Bye now.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.